All right, cool. So, my name is Patrick Downs. I actually currently am the Sales Enablement and Training Manager at PandaDoc. I have a long and varied experience in sales, coming from Yelp to a company called House Call Pro, and then I ran a revenue team at a small startup that almost collapsed. Hopefully not because of me. I'm still kind of out on that one. But now I focus mostly on training up new people that want to sell better, and I have very strong opinions. So
Awesome.
you're going to experience that.
I
Perfect.
like strong opinions. I need strong opinions.
Great. Awesome. Hey guys, I'm Francois Bourdeau. I kind of started more on the IT side of the game as like an infrastructure consultant. Then I got into just consulting and worked from pre-sales and into sales. And right now I would say I'm more about 80% inbound. So I'm really only around 20% on the outbound, like hunting side of the game. And I'm just here with Patrick to help kind of folks like Gil get better at their game. So that's me. Trent.
Yep, Trent Anderson, suburban Chicago, as we were alluding to earlier. Co-founder at Leadleo. We are an account-based sales agency. So we help our clients run and build land and expand campaigns for their must-have accounts. Pretty new-ish to the account-based world. Prior to that, I was at a marketing agency. I was fifth employee there. We got up to about 50 employees by the time I left, 250K revenue, up to 8 million revenue. And had some life changes, got married, had a baby, started wanting to do things a little bit differently, but have always had a really good time on the sales side of things. So yeah, I do primarily fractional work on behalf of my clients. So I assume a role within their sales org, and then help them run and land their must-have accounts.
Super. Thanks, man. Gil, you're on the hot seat.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gil. I just started my own consulting firm at the beginning of January. So just to let you know, sort of when I'm talking to prospects, et cetera, first of all, this is the first time I'm really talking face to face much with people that would, be in a kind of a sales situation. Most times it's either been over the phone or in person.
Okay.
And so normally, people just ask me, who I am, what am I doing? What is my work about?
For sure.
So I talked to them a bit about my history, my background. Right after I finished my undergraduate degree in psychology, I did my MBA because you could do that back then. At certain schools, you go straight into the MBA. It was an amazing grounding experience. I learned a lot with a focus on organizational behavior and strategic management. From there, for the next 16 years, I worked as a delivery consultant, working for a small family consulting firm built around talent management, helping organizations articulate vision and values, helping them create performance management processes, helping them with behavioral interviewing, behavioral competencies, in different areas that were HR peripheral, I'd say. Then sometime around 2016 or so, I started to lose my passion for it. I mean, I'd been doing that for 15 years at the time, and there was something missing for me until 2017 when I started to read more about employee experience. And so for most of the areas that I've read, the employee experience is defined as the sum of all interactions a person has with their employer. I saw this amazing video talking about how everything in life is user experience. The chair you're sitting on right now is a user experience. So for me, that started to delight my mind because it was like, whoa, well, what's the biggest experience any of us have in our lives, but with our employer? We spend 100,000 hours of our lives, if we're lucky, working. That has impact on us as humans, and the impact the experience has on us impacts our ability to perform.
Yep.
So that I started to really read more into that, try to learn more about it. It was a very new idea. There are a lot of different ways of going about it. There are a lot of different ways of viewing it, and I started creating my own ideas. Then in November 2017, I started to work for a small IT firm here in Toronto as Director of Employee Experience.
Cool.
They didn't have anyone previously covering HR or anything internally, organizationally, structure, anything like that. So I came in to help them organize and formalize certain processes, but my angle was different. So one of my things that I see in a lot of organizations today is they create all of their people processes from an organizational lens. What are we trying to accomplish with our people? What do we want our people to do? I was talking to a talent leader down in Florida a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about creating an onboarding program. And he was saying, I was asking him, so what are some of the goals? What are some of the directives? And he kept on talking about the KPIs of where they need to be by a certain point in time. I said, that's great, but that's not what's going to serve the people. Because what's going to serve the people is understanding what onboarding means to a new individual. And in 2020, onboarding actually means it's just a job trial. Right. The person is trying to decide, is this the right place for me or not? So after 2 years of working there, helping them explore different design ideas, to explore different experience, helping them in what they're trying to accomplish, come the end of 2019, it was my time to move on. And I decided I did not want to try to apply my trade somewhere else and internally in another organization. I wanted to go back into consulting. Where my passion is truly around is helping the people. It's those times when on Sunday night you're miserable from 3 o'clock in the afternoon because you know what you have to deal with that week. The stress that people feel with after a bad day that makes it more difficult for them to relate and communicate with their families. We've all had those days. So coming out of that experience, I had to decide, okay, what do I want to do? Employee experience is literally everything a person experiences at an organization. What's my angle on it? Where can I help? Where can I add value to organization? So the first thing that organizations need is an understanding of what's the current state. They need to know that each group, every organization has a different group of people and they're going to be motivated by different things. So I help organizations understand what their current state is and what their people truly care about. Because if employee experience is a mile wide, you can't put focus on all parts. Whoever chases 2 rabbits catches none. So this is about helping the organization recognize, okay, so you're missing some items and you're failing on some aspects of employee experience because you haven't directed attention to that. So what you need to do is understand your people. Then I would create a prioritization of this is what needs to be done.
Maybe that was a client. Maybe that was a prospect.
The call, a sales call.
It was not. They don't come in on my home line. Wish they did, but they don't. So I work with them to create what are the 1 or maybe 2 items that can create this evolution that they need to create. I can't go into a leadership team and say, hey, you're doing things completely wrong, change everything. But I can say, you're doing certain things right. Here are your leverage points. I've been working now for 20 years in facilitating focus groups. I know how to create a psychologically safe environment where people will open up. Most internal operations, HR teams, talent teams don't necessarily have the trust from the average employee to completely open up and share what's exactly happening in their day-to-day. But I know from my experience that if you go in with the right environment and the right attitude, people will share. Then once I've created this priority, that depends on what the priority is. Some organizations may need something that they can do internally that has nothing to do with me. Some of them may need aspects they need co-created with me that I can support them on. And some of them are completely not in my field at all, that I would make suggestions, either direct suggestions or general suggestions on whom to reach out to. So at this point, I kind of pass it off to the individual. They sort of pick out the pieces that they find interesting. And then I start to ask them questions around, okay, so what are your people practices like? What's going on at your organization? Okay.
That was a good, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was going to say that sounds like a good overview of who you are, what you do, but maybe, did you have more to add? Sorry.
On that specifically, I generally, because it all comes down to what the organization is facing, that's why I leave it up to them, because often what happens is they pick out pieces of it that they relate to.
Yeah.
They understand. And I didn't necessarily go into, I like to go into when I'm in person on the whiteboard, a view of employee experience in the employee life cycle. Right. Because there is, are any of you familiar with the ELTV, or employee lifetime value?
I've heard of it, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert in it.
So what it is a chart that plots over time the value a person has brought into an organization. So it starts out at a negative value at their day one, because the organization has had to put in time asking questions, right. Has to put in time with the recruiter, has to put in effort. They have to put in that effort. So that starts at 0. Over time, as they onboard, they move up to productivity, and in theory, they should be adding value to the organization.
Right.
So there's a general plot to the curve. Let me see if I can draw it and show it to you quickly. So it starts out on the left below 0,
okay,
climbs over time to productivity, and then at a certain point, when the person knows they're no longer going to be in the organization, it decreases down to 0.
Interesting. It knows that.
The point about the work that I do and the value of the work that I do is that it helps the organization find leverage points of how to increase that curve. Because the reality is that if you show what the curve is like for a disengaged person who leaves quickly, well, that's 2 people leaving quickly relative to 1. So you can see the value conceptually that one person who's motivated and engaged over 2 years brings relative to 1 person over 1 year.
Right.
And so the way I often think about it is, you're all sales guys. Have you ever had a boss or an experience that upset you and demotivated you? Something that drove you to want to leave that organization, right? Now think about the value you've brought to your own organization and other organizations since that date.
Right.
That if that boss had been able to create an environment for you that had motivated you and kept you, your value would have continued to grow for them as opposed to for someone else.
Right.
So in today's environment, we're in 2020, and we're effectively at full employment in Canada and the US, which puts employees in control, because they can leave and they can find another opportunity much more easily than during a recession or during a slow economy.
Right.
Most organizations that I've spoke to, most HR leaders that I've spoken to have said, whether or not retention was a problem prior to 2 years ago, it's been a problem over the last 24 months. For a skilled role, the research says that every time a person leaves, it costs you 100% of their annual salary.
Wow.
And that goes up as you move to leadership roles. There's a lot of money being lost because organizations aren't creating their design intentionally.
Interesting.
And by creating an intentional design focused on 2 sides, there's one side, which is what are the employees looking for? But then there's always the other side, which is what are leadership driving and what do leadership actually value?
Right.
You can't go into an organization and tell them to change certain practices if it's completely against what they believe in. It will fail.
Yeah.
It needs to be an understanding of where does the leadership want to go and how can they create and define an experience that will drive that.
Right. Well, if you were trying to tell me earlier you're nervous, Gil, I can't see any hint of it. I mean, I can tell you're like super passionate about this, but I guess I just want to make sure in terms of like time, we give everybody enough time to go around and help, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, like, Gil knows what he's talking about. He's passionate about this. So I think in terms of like the time you have, Gil, today, part of one of your challenges was like, there's no question when you get in the door, you're adding value, but maybe part of the question and challenge you have is, you have a personal network that you said you've used and leveraged, and you're starting to do things on LinkedIn. But part of your question and the reason you wanted to jump on this call today was really like, how can I help present this or package it up to prospective buyers? And so, I'm kind of looking to Trent and Patrick to go, okay, like if we were saying, you know, this is interesting to our organization, what are some of those levers that if Gil reached out to us or Gil was sharing content, we'd go, yeah, that's, you know, like there was some numbers there that made me go, yeah, those are real. But, you know, to your, you know, example last week, Patrick, when you took us down that pain funnel, I mean, we all have issues, but then sometimes it's really showing how, you know, like really those triggers to say you have these pains, and then jumping into, well, you know, if I did this, would you be interested? So it's one thing to just keep showing people the pains they have, but after a while you have to kind of lead them to, well, here's how I can help you. So I'll stop talking, but I'm curious. I want to give everybody some time, and maybe we'll start with Patrick just in the top left, and then head over to Trent in terms of like, okay, you've heard what Gil has to say, but now, you know, as somebody who might be a prospective client, or just general questions.
Yeah, Gil, you're clearly a very impressive human being. All of your experience is amazing.
Thank you.
But to be completely honest with you, you know, you probably spoke for about 10 minutes there, and I'd say like the first 8 minutes, I kind of went in and out, just because human nature, I think, tries to connect to things that are most related to us internally, and because I haven't shared a lot of the experiences that you have, I just kind of tuned out. It's just I think the way a lot of people are. So when you got to the part where you were like, hey, have you ever had a bad manager? I was like, okay, if you're talking to someone like me, that's where you should start. Like everything else could just almost be entirely cut out. And that like 1 minute section, I was like, all right, I'm already bought into what you have to say. And then when you showed me that graph and we were talking about how like there could be 2 employees in that one time span, I was like, all right, that connected right after you gave me that example. And I was tuned in after
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So kind of like you said, Frank, getting on the pain of like, all right, that bad experience, and then immediately providing a solution to it was really effective. And if you could just clip that out and use that as part of your prospecting and come up with some other examples of problems that can relate specifically to the personas you're speaking to, I think you'll be getting a lot of doors open for you.
Okay, that's great feedback. Quick question I have, because that's actually something I've been thinking about, that specific sort of lead around asking people about bad bosses and when they left. Did you find the part where I asked you about or mentioned the value you brought to other organizations? How did that land?
It definitely landed. And I mean, I think that would land even better on the boss, because that's the actual pain, right? Of like, I could have potentially lost somebody that is leading an organization now in a really efficient way because of something I did.
So that's actually a great point, and I'll be honest with you. So ultimately, my prospects are not salespeople. Ultimately, my prospects are either senior HR leaders or the boss. That is ultimately who is able to actually make a difference in the area of employee experience. And those are the people who are likely to relate to the pains of turnover, engagement, and lost money as a result of that.
And ultimately actually like hire you. So a salesperson might be like, yeah, this is a massive problem in our company. They're not going to hire you.
No.
Person up the food chain is going to hire you.
Yeah, that at best, they would be able to pass me off to somebody else, unless it's a sales leader who is looking to take on an initiative within their own particular area.
Cool.
So
Gotcha.
that is really helpful feedback, Patrick. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and for your perspective, I do have like direct reports, and I'm in a sales leadership role. So for me specifically, like if you were prospecting me, that part would have really hit.
Perfect.
But
Okay, that's great to know.
So to that point, Patrick, though, like you said, like that hook, right? Like where you kind of go, yeah, that's my pain. But then would you say pretty quickly, Gil also has to articulate to you, you know, I know you have this pain, but here's how I can help, because, you know, I'm just not as direct. And this is a compliment, Patrick. You know, I was nodding, Gil, but there were points where I was like, okay, you know, he's got a lot of good things to say, but, you know, trying to look at from another perspective, you know, if we've never met and we're not giving you this open forum, somebody might be like, TikTok, man, like what, you know, you got the pain point, but now help me understand how you're gonna like actually help me. And you know, Patrick, I'm curious, you know, or Trent, you know, if you saw that hook, whether it was through a LinkedIn post, an email, you'd probably also want to know, okay, great, this is a problem, but help me understand really quickly, like not in a grandiose way how you'll solve it, but lead me there.
Yeah. I agree with everything you guys have said about that initial background, the first 10 minutes, the first 8 versus the final 2. I was actively trying to distill all of the really good context into like a paragraph, right? And kind of what I wrote was, hiring is expensive, churn is even more so. I help you retain talent through X, Y, and Z. And I'm not exactly sure what your X, Y, and Z are, Gil, but it sounds like it's system design, it's creating programs, and it's giving them some sort of actionable content from which they can employ some of these strategies that you're promoting. That was my take. Again, I'll say it again a little bit slower. Hiring is expensive, churn is even more so. I help organizations retain talent through X, Y, and Z, whatever those X, Y, and Zs might be.
You could immediately transition into a really specific story about how you've done that for someone else. I think that would be even better.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah, I think that like that was a great free marketing service there, Trent, of distilling it for him. But I would say, like, to Patrick's point, like, Trent, I mean, you gave him the framework there, but the X, Y, and Z, like you said, Patrick, there's got to be 20 flavors, right, Gil, where for this type of a company, they're going to be like, that is my pain, like that, you're speaking to me. You know what I mean? So you whether it's vertical, horizontal, it's going to be more vertical than horizontal, but yeah, there's got to be stories where, you're not naming people, but you have more specific examples that I think, Patrick's like, yeah, I got that pain. And yes, those really relate.
Okay.
Yeah, and you might not sell to sales guys, Gil, but I think sales by its very nature is a very nomadic profession in which turnover is higher than it's ever been. And I think the recent state of SaaS was that for every dollar spent in customer acquisition, like it costs like $1.07 to actually staff it with a SDR or something. So SDRs are just getting plucked and promoted, and that has a huge cost to revenue operations, right? And you guys are a little bit more versed in some of the rev ops, especially you, Patrick. But finding salespeople is really hard, and then retaining them is even harder through quotas and comp plans. And I mean, look, it's February 14th, and just this week you start to see all like the sales kickoffs, and people are just a buzz on LinkedIn. When you think about it, I mean, we're halfway through February right now, and people are just getting their comp plans, and then it starts Q2 and they're already behind. So it's like sales is very much broken in my opinion. So that would be, like a subset of who you could sell to is HR managers in velocity and growth driven organizations, I would say, because it is a really big problem. And I'm sure you guys have really good examples of that in your own careers. I know I do.
Patrick's silent because he does not experience any of those pain points. He's inside laughing, going, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Everything's like perfect in my world.
Yeah, no, people definitely are leaving because of comp plans at places that I've been at recently. Like you said, I don't think we're going to get ours until April, which is crazy.
Wow.
So there's a lot of tension at almost every place I've worked at when that happens, and you can feel it. Geez, that was loud.
See, just to chime in there, that is right there an aspect of employee experience, because right now you're dealing with the ambiguity of not having that comp plan for another 2 months.
Totally.
If the organization had designed your experience around what would serve you and what would create a better opportunity for you to sell more effectively, you would have probably already had that comp plan 6 weeks ago. And you would have been able to move forward coming the start of January, which would make you and your team more effective. That's when I talk about how the organization is designed, how your experience is designed in a way that creates success for you. So part of the problem around people and culture, employee experience, is there's this view of, oh, it's just throw a few foosball tables in there and now we've got ourselves a culture. But it's not about that. It's about how people are treated, and it's about how people are set up for success. There are many ways that you three could tell me that I have no idea about how a salesperson is and is not set up for success. You've seen in your experiences ways it's been done well and ways it's been done less well. Those are all aspects of the experience that your salespeople are having. And if you define and create that experience around helping those pain points, so if that's a pain point, Patrick, that you're facing, then what I would do is work with your group, help you go through a journey map of what is it like to be a salesperson here? Where are the pain points? Where are the friction points? And how might we redesign this operation in a way that will help you be successful?
Gotcha. And again, what you just said there was compelling, but if you had come in with a specific case of you doing that specific thing for someone else, social proof is so powerful. And especially when like my brain is in the moment of the pain and you almost have me in a state of hypnosis because you've interrupted the pattern of my life, you need to give me that right away, like Frank was saying earlier. Okay. And I think you would have me.
Okay. So one quick question I have is, like Trent, I think you like plucked on something that's pretty important. Like in SaaS, it's a problem. It's probably a problem in a lot of industries, but I'm curious, like Patrick and Trent, and I guess ultimately to Gil, it's a question, but like, how do you guys feel around, like, do you think he should really be focusing on specific verticals where he can really tailor that message, or try and be like really horizontal, like I can help anybody and everybody? I have some thoughts there. I mean, there's like a raging debate often around like specialist or generalist, but I think, I think messaging wise, if you start to focus, you're going to have more success because you can tailor that message.
I agree. I mean, you got to start somewhere. And Gil, I don't know exactly what kind of companies you've worked with in the past. You probably want to start with verticals or industries that you're familiar with, because you at least speak their language a little bit more. We're sales guys, so we have intimate knowledge of how it works in sales. But if like you have a wealth of experience in manufacturing and you understand that in order to get someone to work third shift, the demand is low because they can, make X amount more, working in a fast food place or whatever the case might be. Those really relevant, topical pain points and scenarios, like Patrick has been saying, that's what you want to start with. And that's how your messaging should be driven.
So then for me, that's tech. Because for 2 years, I was director of employee experience in a tech organization. Much like salespeople, tech people also are moving often, especially in today's environment. They are getting recruited weekly, if not more often than that. And thanks to the changes that I made at the organization I was working, they stopped listening to those recruiters.
Yeah,
they were sticking around longer at the organization because it was a great experience, a place that was driving them, that allowed them not to worry about it. Didn't matter even if the other company was offering, 10, 15, 20,000 more. That wasn't what they were looking for. Now, unfortunately, when they start offering 50,000 more, there's not much you can do about it.
Right? There is some numbers that will just change people to do things that you had convinced them they shouldn't do. Interesting.
And how often are you telling that story, Gil, that you just told there, your own story?
Yeah.
Not as much as I will be in the future.
That was my favorite thing you said this whole time. That should be on every pitch. Like, I did this in like a role in the company that was built for that, and now I'm going to help you do it. I've already done this somewhere else. They weren't taking the recruitment offers. Like, you need to trust me specifically because of this.
Well, that social proof, powerful. That example, you nailed it, right, Patrick? That's what people want to hear, because if you, like you said, you've got their attention, they're in that state of hypnosis. I like that. And then when you kind of go, this is what I did there, you're like, where do I sign?
Okay, this stuff is gold.
So Gil, like, yeah, we made it sound like you're just going to be like cranking out dollars tomorrow.
No. I didn't say like that. I mean gold in the fact that I'm starting out as an absolute noob and I am learning a lot right now. So
yeah,
that's
I guess I'm curious, like, what is like the next, I don't want to say 30, 60, 90 day plan look like, but like, I guess, try and leverage this experience to kind of go, okay, well, this is how I'm basically selling today. Let's help you figure out, like, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, like what you're doing now, I'm not saying isn't working, but you want to either amp it up or make it better. And right now, like you said, you're clearly just going to your network. You're just kind of going on LinkedIn. One thing that I thought of like right away was when, Trent and Patrick were giving you examples of what you could say. I mean, right there, to me, those are like perfect opportunities to engage with people on LinkedIn. Like, share those stories, And I would say be as bold as to kind of just say, like, you know, here's some, like, you know, you need those hooks of like statistics, like numbers that are going to make people go like, shit, man, like that is my problem. And ask the questions like, what are you guys seeing out in the field that are problems? And you're going to, I would be shocked if you don't get some engagement around that. I mean, I'll be posting comments. Now, I'm not saying that's your only tool. I mean, right now, when I went to your website, it looks, you know, pretty basic, which is, you know.
No, it's an under construction page, my website right now. That I know, and I know I have to correct that. I have a friend who's working on that right now. But that is, so you raise a really great point. And so for me, what I think I need the most help with at this point is that, how do I get my foot in the door? How do I get people to want to even have a conversation with me who's not somebody from my existing network? How do I get somebody to want to do that? Because it's an area where like I said, I've never been a salesperson. I don't know how to do it right. I don't know how to do, I've been raised on images of bad salespeople in movies for too many years.
Right.
That respectfully, I just don't know how to do it properly. Like, I know I have something that I believe can help people, but there's a hump that I'm getting over in terms of how to try to get my foot in the door in a way that's not bad.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah. So that would probably be where I need a lot of advice right now, is how do I do that SDR for myself of, you know, drumming up interest, getting myself meetings, because thankfully, generally when I've gotten meetings, people tend to be engaged. Not everybody is going to go forward, obviously, but some are, and I'm getting a certain level of engagement there. It's getting that foot in the door.
Trent and Patrick, I'll hand that one over to you. I would say you guys are probably going to have a few ideas there, because I'm hearing it's not the value once you're getting in front of somebody that's difficult to articulate. It's convincing them to talk to you, and then what channels do you even use?
Yeah, and I'll be straight up honest, overcoming my own still simmering social anxiety in trying to put myself out there and talk to people who I think they have a reason to talk to me, but they have no idea about that right now.
Yeah, and are you using any tools for prospecting at all, or is it just like nothing yet?
Nothing. I don't know. Nothing yet.
Okay. I have a lot of suggestions, and Gil, I think we're kind of over a little on time, right, Frank? Unless we're going.
Well, do we have half an hour or an hour?
Well, I typically carve out an hour, but I also want to make sure everybody's okay. Like if somebody's got to jump, that's cool.
I should be good.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll just go into it then.
Myself, so
5.
All right, I'll do my ramble.
Okay, you go first, Patrick. Do your ramble.
Cool, I'll do my ramble. So what I'd recommend is, for tools, you need to get LinkedIn Sales Navigator and a prospecting tool like Zoom Info or Seamless. Build lists that are in your target market of people that you've either worked with before, you know that you work well with. For example, my ideal client would be someone that's in the SaaS industry between 11 to 200 employees, and then probably a manager or above on sales or operations. You can build that list in Sales Navigator. Then you can export that list into a prospecting tool to get their information. And then from there, you should be using probably something like HubSpot, because it has a free CRM that you can get started with. And
that I'm on.
That data. Yeah, you're on HubSpot. All right, good. And then you can use that to manage those contacts. And from there, I would then build out a talk track for each of those different verticals that you're going into, and then some simple email cadences that have messaging that matches what your talk track is, and then set up that on everyone that you plan to reach out to, and carve out at least 2 hours a day for prospecting every day while you're getting started, and just do it. It's one of those things where I started doing it by recording myself doing it, and then I would listen back to it and watch myself too, because I would use video and just see what that was like, and then tweak it from there like it was a game tape. And that there's more we can go into, but I think if you want to get started, that would be how I would do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Patrick. In addition to some of like the technical ops setup, I would also just look on LinkedIn and search people that are talking about employee engagement or employee churn or anything like that. Leave a comment on the content that they're posting, saying, hey, I empathize with whatever you're going through. We had a similar scenario, XYZ, whatever. And just get yourself out there, right? You want to make sure that the people view you as a thought leader. And from our brief conversation thus far, I mean, I think all three of us are very much impressed with your subject matter expertise.
For sure.
It's getting back to the masses more. So how do you do that? Again, you're leaving comments, you're being thoughtful, you're engaging with people, but I think it also comes from posting your own content, especially as someone that, feels some of that social anxiety, maybe a little bit more introverted. And to be honest, I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. And as a salesperson, that's almost like sacrilege. But the way that I kind of overcome some of that is by posting content myself, right? And you're clearly very comfortable on camera. So, I mean, if you do, hey, here's a 2-minute video of some of the things that we're seeing in tech right now from employee engagement or lack thereof, how can you work this into your process? You always want to provide value as much as you can. People will, kind of wax poetic about how much information you should give away for free versus what should, kind of be, your secret sauce. But I would definitely take content creation to a bigly to heart, if you will, and then engage in forums like this as well. I'm sure there are any number of people that are dealing with this who might want to create a smaller community of people that are like-minded, in which you can bounce ideas off each other, where you can have open, honest feedback. Because what this does is, one, starts to hone your pitch a little bit more, and then two, it gets you more comfortable on camera talking to people about what it is that you do. And if you record it, then you have additional content to post. So I would definitely go content heavy and try to have meaningful conversations without thinking of yourself as a salesperson.
Awesome. Thank you.